Welcome everybody to another gorgeous, very windy afternoon here in Los Angeles. That's at least in my neck of the woods. Um, right. Welcome to the West Coast Jazz Hour, episode number 31. And today we're going to have a very special episode. We're going to do a tribute to one of the greatest American composers and arrangers in the music of jazz, which is Gerald Wilson, and we're going to do that with our special guest, which is Anthony Wilson, Gerald's son, guitar player, composer, arranger, and also very fine photographer. Welcome, Anthony.
Kevin, hey Josh,
Yeah.
you
A-
guys.
And of course, I'm doing this every time with my partner in crime and co-host Josh Nelson. What's up, buddy?
Yeah. Happy to be back.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, for sure, Anthony. Thank you so much for being here.
Just a pleasure.
Let's dive into some biographical information. And Anthony, you can totally correct me about all of the stuff that I'm saying, or if
Okay.
it's any
Yeah.
misinformation that I'm spreading out there. Hopefully not. But Gerald Wilson was born as Gerald Stanley Wilson on September 4th, 1918 in Shelby, Mississippi, and died on September 8th, 2014 in LA. And he was a trumpet player, composer, arranger, and band leader. He was named a NEA Jazz Master in 1990, and his life's work is stored in the Library of Congress. In his early career, he played and or wrote arrangements for Jimmie Lunceford, Benny Carter, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Dizzy Gillespie, and he has also written arrangements for Sarah Vaughan, Nancy Wilson, Ray Charles, Lionel Hampton, Julie London, Billie Holiday, and Dinah Washington. I found out that he played in 1949 with Coltrane, and besides that has played with people such as Teddy Edwards, Neil Hefti, Leroy Vinnegar, Curtis Counts, and Harold Lands. Um, he had obviously his own big bands, and some of the people who were playing in the band of Gerald Wilson were Snooky Young, Al Pacino as lead trumpet players. Soloists on trumpet were, among others, Carmel Jones and Bobby Bryant. Saxophone players Bud Shank, Joe Maney, Harold Land, Teddy Edwards, and Don Raffel. Rhythm section people included guitarist Joe Pass, Richard Groove Holmes on organ, Jimmy Bond on bass, Jack Wilson on piano, vibraphone players Roy Ayers, Bobby Hutcherson, and drummers Mel Lewis, Paul Humphrey, and Mel Lee. You guys couldn't get anybody good, I see.
Wow.
And I'll also share some background information about our amazing special guest. Um, Anthony is considered one of the finest guitar players in jazz. He has worked and recorded with Ron Carter, Mose Allison, Bobby Hutcherson, Madeline Peru, Joe Sample, Al Jarreau, and Harold Land, to name a few. He's also not afraid of stepping out of the jazz realm and has played on albums by pop music legends such as Paul McCartney, Willie Nelson, Leon Russell, Aaron Neville, and Barbara Streisand. Besides that, he is a recipient of the Thelonious Monk Institute International Composers Award, which he got in 1995, 1959. That's a little too long ago. And he has received commissions from Jazz at Lincoln Center, the Los Angeles Philharmonic Association, the International Association of Jazz Education, and the Henry Mancini Institute. And in 2019, he was selected as a McDowell Colony Fellow. So, oof, that's a mouthful.
We all keep busy, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you're doing something good, that's for sure. That being said, I just wanted to say from a personal standpoint that it's been really amazing to dive into the music of your dad. As you can see, I have two records behind me over here, and Josh has a bunch of records behind him on his piano as well. So we're big fans, and for me it was. I've been busy with this for a couple of weeks because I listened to mostly newer albums that I wasn't really familiar with. So it's been a really, really great exploration of his music, and to see also with how many different kinds of styles he brought together, because he wasn't afraid of playing jazz tunes and making arrangements of jazz standards, but also go into the pop realm, just like yourself, and make big band arrangements of very cool, like funky and pop tunes. So that also reminded me of you, like that you're not afraid of doing the same thing, basically. So it's super cool to dive into his music and seeing the progression of his early work going into the work of the 60s, going into the work of the 80s. So it's been a real pleasure to dive into his music.
Well, it will be a lot of fun to re-experience it through your ears, the two of you, as you're discovering things and noticing things about it. So that's I've been really looking forward to that.
Great, yeah, amazing. Well, why don't we start off right away with some music, and we can talk and discuss about that. So, Josh, you've picked out a tune. You maybe want to say something about that?
Yeah. This first track I thought we'd share is one of the first Gerald records I got everywhere from 1968, Pacific Jazz Records, and it features a trumpet player named Bobby Bryant, who I thought was an interesting connection and a way to start the conversation a little bit, because, Anthony, because I was in Bobby's youth jazz orchestra for a little while in the late 90s. Bobby was in poor health, but he would conduct us, and there were some Gerald stories. I remember him kind of sharing with us, and just various alumni from different bands, and I mean, a lot of young cats, but then there were some ringers in there who I can't even remember. Maybe Bijan Watson was in it at some point, but it's a good 25 years ago. So Bobby Bryant's connection, a local LA jazz hero in some ways, who's on so many sessions, TV and film, and worked with your father on many records. And I just love his sound and his approach to this great Harold Arlen tune, Out of This World. And I love this arrangement. We'll talk a little bit more about maybe some of his techniques and his Gerald style in arranging a piece like this. So this is Out of This World, arranged by Gerald Wilson from the record Everywhere.
Fantastic.
It's so slamming. It's so good.
Yes, I love it.
Oh, I was just reading the liner notes, and it says this arrangement was first played in 1945 at Los Angeles famed Orpheum Theater, a fact jazz cognoscenti will welcome. How often do you hear that word, cognoscenti? Cognoscenti, you know.
Yes.
And then that whole other vibe on the second half with Bobby Hutcherson is just like another. It really is out of this world. It takes you to this other realm. I mean, this arrangement has so much going on in it. It's a full story to me, you know.
Well, you know, and it's actually a good way to start because if that arrangement is that early. My father had only been arranging for about 6 years at that point.
Yeah.
And the first arrangement that he contributed to the Jimmie Lunceford band was High Spook. I think I thought it was Yard Dog Mazurka, but it's the other way around. It's High Spook. So, and also put yourself in the Orpheum Theater and hearing sounds like that in 1945. I mean, let's really think about that in terms of kind of the harmonic structures that are being used, the sounds that are being used, the time feels and different things. I mean, who knows how it might have been slightly different then, but the essence of that arrangement, that sounds like a 60s, it sounds that advanced in terms of it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like somebody recording something in 1968 that they would have played in 1945. So that's really illuminating.
I hadn't read the liner notes until right now. And as I'm listening, I mean, maybe when I first bought it, but it didn't sink in that it was that early. I'm very curious what that original iteration of that arrangement sounds like.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point.
I don't think, I'm sure he didn't record it at that time during that era. It's not one of the things that are in the very early recordings, but so good. And all those, you know, the double times coming back into the swing things, it's just fantastic, and the rhythmic quality of it really hits me right now.
Same.
All those figures are just so strong, you know.
Yeah.
But if his band, the band that he started in 1945, was his first band, so that's pretty tough. That's good.
And the first band that he started in 45 was in Chicago, right?
Was in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay, okay.
Moved, so I guess we'll get into it. I was just also looking. I don't have a copy of Everywhere here, but I've got the Mosaic set.
Ooh, yeah.
That was published some years ago, and I mean, this band is so fantastic. You know, in addition to Bobby Bryant, Lester Robertson, Thurman Green on trombones. Anthony Ortega would have been the
soloist there.
Soloist. Harold Land, Hadley Kalaman, Bobby Hutcherson, Fillmore III, Joe Pass, Frank Butler is the drummer.
Oh, hey-o.
That's amazing.
It lists in here, well, maybe it's more than one drummer because they talk about Carl Lott.
Yeah.
Carl Lott.
Is he only on some tracks?
Yeah, on Everywhere, Del Olivar, M. Capitania, a little bit of soul. So, I mean, they must be dealing with, at Mosaic, they've got the tapes and they know which, you know.
Sure.
So, yeah, pretty amazing. But, and it was done about a month later. That session was done about a month later. So, the 4-tune session.
Cool.
Yeah, Bobby Hutcherson. And I was just listening to that and just thinking, what an artist Bobby Hutcherson was. I mean, it's pretty clear that he was being directed to not solo, but play the melody and embellish the melody, and how beautifully that, I mean, because he's such a melodist anyway. And so I can imagine, you know, he and my father were so close, and he'd probably say, Bobby, now what I want you to do here, you know, just play the melody and play around the melody, you know, and like, and Bobby just does everything so perfectly,
Yeah.
you know. Oh, just beautiful. And I love that you started with this because it's such an imaginative arrangement. It has so much power and density. I always like to tell people how important that was to my father, to have a real sense of being an orchestra, not just a band. You know, like he played with both things, because we'll hear some things I know today, things like patterns. I think you plan to play that. And that's almost like a small group arrangement. You know, it's like a small group within a big group, but then there are things like this, and the kind of the breadth of the orchestra is really used to its full capacity in an arrangement like that. And
Yeah.
I know how proud he was of that arrangement, for sure.
Yeah, that hit me. I mean, this is this record I put on all the time. It's just just from the first. I think the first track is, what is it? Is it Everywhere with the harpsichord?
Yeah.
Da, da, da.
Oh yeah.
Da, 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 da. It's just like, hey, baby, this is Gerald Wilson cocktail time right now. And then when that Out of This World kicks in, it is just, it's like something else. I don't know. You hear so much in that one arrangement.
And let's look at that record cover. Fold that thing out now.
Yeah, right.
It's so beautiful. It's got a little.
So cool.
Yeah. Well, this way.
Yeah.
A little writing over here, unfortunately, but
just fantastic.
I know. Look at that design. It's almost like a Saul Bass like film title or something.
Totally.
Pacific Jazz. What a great label. He had a long relationship with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about a decade. For about a decade, he made records for them, and then also arranged for other artists that had recordings on the label. So it was really fruitful for him. I mean, you've talked about the Carmel Jones and Tricky Lofton record. Jean-Luc Ponty, he did an album with. I think there's a kind of a funny one with like where he overdubbed stuff onto previously recorded Wes Montgomery things, because I know they never made anything in the studio together. But I think that's a Pacific Jazz one, and
gotta find that.
Les McCann.
Yeah, sings, right?
That's right.
Les McCann sings.
Two of them on Pacific Jazz.
That's right. That's right. It's the Les McCann and Gerald Wilson, and then Les McCann sings.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Les McCann and Gerald Wilson is super hard to find.
Yes.
Like you can get I think you can get it on Discogs, or you can buy it on Discogs, but there's nothing to find of that record online. Nothing.
Wow.
I don't think. Yeah, and it's not. I think they made an executive decision to like not include it on the Mosaic, since it wasn't a Gerald Wilson album. You know, it was a Les McCann, so it's not on there.
Yeah. Or I remember that there's one track of that Les McCann and Gerald Wilson album on YouTube, but it's just a trio of Les McCann and bass player and a drummer. Nothing with the orchestra.
And here in the notes to the Mosaic, here's a picture of Bobby Hutcherson and my dad.
Oh, super
great
cool
shot. Oh man.
Fantastic. It says, it's at Marty's on the Hill in the late 60s. So about the same time. Yeah.
Was that a regular spot where he could perform, because their Live and Swinging is from Live at Marty?
Yeah, I believe so. And he played also quite a bit at the Lighthouse. I think he had a weekly residency at the Lighthouse for I'm not sure how long it went, but that was also another place that he played quite a bit in the 60s.
Right on. I'm also a little curious how he went about in choosing the people for his band, because he had excuse me, long standing relationships with people who played in the bands, such as Bobby Bryant and Snooky Young, Teddy Edwards, and all of those people. Um, did he ever talk with you about um, searching for like young blood in his adding young blood in his band, or how he went about in choosing the band? Because there's also a super cool TV excerpt of Frankly Jazz on YouTube. There are
Right.
a bunch of clips from there, and it seems that a lot of the people that were in the band stayed with him also for years in the band.
That's right. I mean, he was very loyal to the people that he loved, and he also loved people who really stuck with him and really loved him. But I think, I mean, he came out of the tradition of the great black swing orchestras, and it was very important to him that though it was very important to him to preserve something of that tradition and something of what it meant to have a black band with a black identity. But of course, we are mentioning people such as Joe Pass, or I see, Steve Hofstetter. You know, he Anthony Ortega is
Hmm.
Latino, and so in fact his was a real kind of mixed band, and I actually think as time went on, that was really what he valued, a sense
Mm.
of a kind of cohesion and cooperation and mixture of musicians. I mean, Joe Maney. um uh, who else? Jack Nimitz worked with him over the years. I mean, definitely when he started his band in the 40s and 50s, these would have been pretty much all black bands, because of the times. But then I believe in the 60s and 70s, things opened up. He traveled to different universities. He met musicians that he knew would be coming to Los Angeles, that whose playing and talent perked up his ear, and so when they'd be around, he would work with them. So, uh, but he always loved uh, young musicians, young energy to the very end. I mean,
Mm.
in his very last years, he brought people like Kamasi Washington into the band. Um, and many other musicians. So youthful energy, fire, and understanding on a kind of a different level than something old. And he never wanted his band to sound old or old style. Um, he'd say like, "Oh God, those arrangements where they shake the trumpets." He's like, "We don't shake trumpets in our band. We did that in the 40s. If I see a band shaking their trumpets, he's like, that's some old shit, Anthony. You know, who's who's shaking their trumpets in 1999?" Things like that. And he really meant it. Though he, though he had, if you have a 7-decade career, there's going to be a part of that which is really where you established, I think, your voice and your skills and your skill set and your understanding about music. But so many musicians learn to continue adapting, continue learning, continue to find out about how to do things, keep listening, keep themselves stimulated. And I think that was the really important thing for him. So he needed young musicians. Um, he needed musicians who knew what was the new modern thing. And so, of course, he was a mentor to people like Bobby Hutcherson, or to Charles Lloyd, who played in the band, uh,
Hmm.
or a time to Roy Ayers, to So all of these players, because he was a bit older, but yet he didn't want to have a band, like, for instance, that would yeah, I mean, he wanted to be with them. You wanted to be with those kids. And Harold Land, he was kind of a mentor to Harold Land, and all of these musicians, as far as what I've been told, really looked up to the fact that he had come from this deep beginning, and then continued to evolve into what he did in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I've got a couple of amazing things from the 80s that I think you'll dig. We can play little snippets of. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There are two things that you were touching upon, because I saw the interview that they made of the Detroit album, um, and he specifically is also saying that his band is apparently the first all black band that was allowed access to the Flamingo
Right.
hotel, the Flamingo Casino, and that the people in the band were also allowed to go to the craps table and just
Right.
have dinner and all of that stuff. And I noticed that he was so proud
Yes.
of that. He's saying, "I did it all. I did it all, and I've seen it all."
Right. I think Charles Lloyd would have been in that particular band, because Charles has talked to me about being in Vegas with my father, and I think it was the Flamingo. Amazing, amazing.
Yeah, and the second thing was that very early on, what you can tell in the recordings from Big Band Modern from the 50, it's a session from 1950 and I think 1956, how he blends different styles also together in one piece. What he kind of also does in Out of This World,
Sure.
but that there's also a very big presence of Spanish oriented music, Latin music, and then later on in the 60s, the funk and the pop type of stuff. And he was just way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Um, Especially in the 50s, for sure, that he was mixing those kind of things already together that maybe Ellington would hint towards, but your dad already did it very clearly and very
Mhm.
convincingly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe what we should do is sort of go back then and listen to some of these earlier things. I don't know if, people who are listening, how much they know about my dad. I could tell a little bit about his very early life, and then we could, like, get into his first gig with the Jimmie Lunceford band, and play a few things from the 40s and the 50s, and get a sense of. I mean, we've now heard one thing that he did I mean, that's just still blowing my
I
mind.
Mhm.
That arrangement is from 1945. Um, so, because I mean, you really had, like, Dizzy Gillespie's band, um, and Gil Fuller was doing some things. There weren't really any bebop, but that's like a bebop arrangement,
right.
Yeah,
straight from the wellspring of bebop. So, um, does that sound like a good little retrace? So,
Fantastic.
yeah,
so for people who are listening, my father, Gerald Wilson, was born in 1918. He was born in a very small town in the Mississippi Delta, which is the northwestern part of Mississippi, south of Memphis, uh, kind of between Memphis, Tennessee, and Jackson, Mississippi, and it's kind of a canoe-shaped area. It's a floodplain. It's a floodplain of the Mississippi River that creates the border between Mississippi and Arkansas, and further south, Mississippi and Louisiana becomes the lower Mississippi Delta. But the Mississippi Delta that we think of, usually we're thinking of Mississippi Delta blues. So this is really the home of Robert Johnson and Son House and Lightning Hopkins. Is Lightning Hopkins from Mississippi? So many, Charlie Patton, uh, Mississippi John Hurt, all of these amazing, Skip James, all of these people came from this area. And uh, so I always think of my dad as a blues musician. I mean, it's something that I hear in his music that I don't hear in a lot of other arrangers and composers. So I always like to point that out, that although I don't think his mother would have allowed him to listen to blues. So this is his mother, Lillian. This is his father, Shelby. This is his brother, Shelby Jr. This is his sister, Mildred. And this picture was taken before he was born.
Ah.
So he's not in the picture. But I love it. I mean, we could do a whole show on this picture, really.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
It says so much about Black culture of the time. But what I wanted to say, and about this close-knit family, and how much the way they presented themselves meant to them.
Yeah.
I mean, these boots and this ruffle and everything about this picture I love. But his mother, Lillian, she was a school teacher, and she was very active in the Baptist church in town. So she was a staunch church-going woman, and she had no use for blues or jazz, and no use for it, and not interested, but she played piano in the church, and she taught all her children to play. And so my father learned to read music early, and through a kind of a circuitous process, because there was really no education available in a place like Shelby, Mississippi. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, it was a very poor place. It was post-Reconstruction era, early 20th century. He always talks about, people were still parking horses and wagons outside, and so it was sharecropper land. It was it was a poor place. The schools were segregated. There was nothing. So there was a family in the town that had a business in the town, a white family, and they had friends in Memphis. And so my grandmother was able to send my father to a school in Memphis called Manassas High School. So after, when he was about 12 or 13, he went to Memphis. And that was great because Manassas High School had a music program that had been started by Jimmie Lunceford. Jimmie Lunceford was from Memphis, or at least lived in Memphis, and he started the band in Manassas High School, and he was also the football coach and the athletic coach. And so there, my dad could get instruction in trumpet, further good instruction. And then after that was there wasn't much else to do there. He was able to get, in a similar way, boarding with a family that was known to his family and people that they knew. He made his way to Detroit, and he went to a school called Cass Tech. And Cass Technical High School is a legendary school, and many musicians went there, and other famous people. And that was it almost sounds like what I gather from it was it's almost like an arts high school. You had to take instruction in several instruments. You had to study music theory. You had to be in the choir. If you were going to study music, you had to have a kind of a well-rounded education. And so that was how he sort of came up from from a very poor Spartan place into a world where he was able to start working, and there were more, it was still segregated, but there were more opportunities for blacks to do things and move around in the city and make things happen. And of course, Detroit was one of the stops where many, many bands came to play, such as Fletcher Henderson, Duke Ellington would come to play there, Erskine Hawkins, Chick Webb, you know, so we're talking 1936, 37, 35. This is when my dad's there. Earl Hines, he would always talk about the fact that he was able to hear these people, and Jimmie Lunceford, and he got to know various members of the various bands, and everybody started to know that he could play the trumpet, and he started playing in various bands, and one of them was a band of Chick Carter. So he started in Chick Carter's band, and he wasn't in that band very long at all before he was recruited to Jimmie Lunceford's band. And Snooky Young was also in Chick Carter's band. And so my dad was the first one to get the call, and several months later, or maybe a month or two, so my dad replaced the great arranger and trumpet player Cy Oliver in the Lunceford band. And then somebody else left, and so a couple months later, Snooky came on the band. And so so that sort of put him into this place and into this milieu of these great swinging bands. And he, since Cy Oliver was an arranger, and like he talks about this, he says, you know, well, I think Cy Oliver thought, well, how's this kid going to replace me, you know, and, you know, what does he know, you know? But apparently on the very first gigs, Cy was still sitting on the band, and he saw that, like, didn't matter what the tune was, my dad could sight read it cold. And then, like, there were a few solos, and he knew which ones, like, he should give to Gerald to see if he could cut it, and he got them. And so the next day, apparently, Cy Oliver left, and then even my dad started writing for the band not long after that. He wrote one chart, which is sort of the classic arrangers thing that you hear. I wrote a chart for the band, I brought it in, and you know, they put it aside after we played it, and I knew that I had to go back to the drawing board. And then the next chart he wrote is High Spook, and it's great. It's a classic.
It is.
Should we play that? Should we listen to High Spook?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. I'm gonna share sound right here. I have it ready to go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So here we have. Oops, that's Your Dog Mazurka. Here we go. Apologies for the delay. High Spook by the Jimmie Lunceford Band by Gerald Wilson. Here we go. That's 1941.
Oof.
Yes, I think that is Snooky. I think that's Snooky. I was on Yard Dog Mazurka. I believe it's uh, Paul Webster, but I think that's Snooky. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody on your chat will let us know if they. um, but oh, what a great chart! They shook their
Yeah.
trumpets in that one.
Yeah.
So
Decade appropriate.
1940 and kind of yeah, you can tell something was moving forward, and many people talk about that band that when Snooky and my father came on, it was kind of a new breath of fresh air and youth into that band, and they had a really strong several years. um, so yeah, just beautiful.
Yeah.
And you can hear, I mean, there's so much that the Lunceford band is famous for, just their precision, their dynamics, their section playing, you know, just the way the brass section would craft a, sort of the attack and a, you know, a little forte piano and a crescendo on a note. All of that stuff was super precise, and the swing. So
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
so what an education for him. I try to imagine what it must have been like for a 20, basically a 20-year-old person to step into that. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
You know?
A machine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can definitely notice the beginnings of what we heard in Out of This World, like his sense of rhythm, how he uses rhythm in a composition,
Yeah.
the sound and the voicings of the saxophone section, how he uses that later on, also in the '60s.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and there was this other thing that stood out for me. Uh, Never, it's not important, but in any case, those two things are so like connected with the Out of This World arrangement, and then this first piece that we just heard.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That density, that thing that it'll create with a riff.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I love about him, his music and his composition, is his willingness to like stay with something that's almost hypnotic. You know, I mean,
Uh-huh.
throughout his career, he did that, and you know, he'd create these kind of blocks of sound almost, you know, and just create a rhythm that that gave the piece identity and gave it strength. I mean, we probably, since these are short, let's listen to the next year. Do you have Yard Dog Mazurka?
Yeah.
Let's listen to that because it also has a cool riff and there's a little story to it, because he decided to share composer credit with another guy from the band named Roger Segure, who didn't write a note of this arrangement of Yard Dog Mazurka, but my dad was writing. He decided that he was going to write an arrangement of Stompin' at the Savoy, and he had started it, and he was playing it for Roger Segure, and Roger Segure said, "Well, why are you going to write an arrangement on Stompin' at the Savoy?" He said, "You got a good A section right there." He
Mm.
said, "Don't make that the intro to Stompin' at the Savoy. Get yourself a bridge and get your own tune, you know?" And so because of it, he was like, "Well, Roger, thank you so much. That's what I'm going to do." And he was so thankful that he gave Roger half of the piece.
Oh,
So,
that's
yeah.
cool.
And then
Wow.
this is
Mm.
also the piece that many people, possibly people that will be listening, may recognize kind of the sound of it, or not even just the sound of it, the whole thing. It was later basically lifted by Stan Kenton uh,
Mm.
for a song called Intermission Riff.
Oh,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Ray Wetzel who got the credit for Intermission Riff. We could look that up, but
Uh-huh.
anyway, you'll hear it immediately.
Yeah. Jim Bourne says here, my
Oh,
Decca
Jim,
LP reissue says.
we can't hear you, Kev.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah.
My Decca LP reissue says Joe Thomas, Trummy Young, Ted Buckner, and Paul Webster for
It
High
was Paul.
Spook.
Okay, yeah,
Oh, okay.
Paul. Yeah, Paul was doing it, man.
Yeah, I could put on Yard Dog Mazurka right now, so let's take a listen.
Thanks, Jim.
Here we go. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
there's that
beautiful.
rhythm. That
Right,
rhythm.
right.
It just propels. I just love watching you conduct, Anthony. It reminds me of when you did the tribute at Catalina Bar and
Mm.
Grill here in
Hmm.
LA, and how much care and well curating you were doing that night, and so many members of the band were there, and
Mm.
um, it's just really special. Thank you for doing this. This is like we're getting
Oh,
a visual, oral history of your father and his legacy. And just thanks for everyone joining. We got a lot of people loving this. Your mother's here. Jerry GW is
that's my sister.
that's your sister. Yeah, she's here too. Hey Jerry. Anyway,
Yeah,
so Yard Dog Mazurka. Wow,
yeah.
so killing.
I mean, really a classic, really a classic. And you can hear he's developing fast, a little more he's trying more things. You can just hear. And I think Jim can help us because I don't have any credits, but I think that's him taking the first solo at least.
Oh.
That's true.
And
Jim already responded. He says Gerald Wilson, Willie Smith,
right,
Paul
great,
Webster,
yeah,
Trummy Young, Al Norris on guitar, then
Norris,
Trummy, Snooky, and Paul Webster.
yep,
Oof.
yep, yeah. It's like a kind of a high trumpet duel, which is awesome, and
Yeah.
it's just fantastic. And I mean, put these guys on the map, I'd say. Um, but they didn't last too much longer in the band. I mean, I think they were gone by about 42.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so from about 39 to 42, my father was in the band. He eventually, we're pre-war, World War II. My dad joined the Navy, and he was posted up at the Great Lakes Naval Base, where they had a band that also included Willie Smith. I believe Clark Terry was
Yeah.
in that band. Many, many like heavy hitters. It was like known. They just knew to get all the best jazz musicians and bring them to this to be in this band. And apparently, my dad would always say, like, I didn't spend a day on the bass after the first day. You know, Chicago was their playground, and then they did what they had to do as part of the Great Lakes. And but eventually he moved and settled in Los Angeles, and that's where he started his first band. So the Orpheum Theater concert in 1945 would have been with that band, which included people like Jimmy Bunn and Melba Liston,
Melba.
many people.
Melba. Yeah.
Some that won't be known. I'm actually looking for a record that Jim gave me, a CD that Jim gave me, a kind of a bootleg of the early stuff. Oh, it's right here. But so yeah, I mean, in 1945, Snooky Young is in the band. So Snooky Young made his way out here as well. I think they might have been playing with Benny Carter too.
Mm-hmm.
Emmett Berry, Hobart Dotson. That's a name that I heard quite a bit. I don't really know a lot about him. Melba Liston. I mean, just one of the great legends as a player, as an arranger and composer, and as a real pioneer.
Yeah.
Her importance is so. I mean, that's like another one of those examples. My father was not going to have any business with like keeping somebody as talented as Melba Liston out of the scene. No, she deserved to be around. It's just going back to the point that you made of the kind of people that he wanted around him.
Mm-hmm.
See, he worked with Red Callender at that time. Red Callender is the bass player on a recording called Dissonance in Blues. He takes a great solo. There's a lot of different things that we could listen to from that time. You've got a couple of things, right?
Yeah, I have Dissonance in Blues ready to go. Etta is ready to go. What else do I have right
Groovin'
here?
High on the list.
Groovin' High is on the list, and that's basically the thing that I wrote down from the Big Band Modern record was Lotus Land, but on that recording he starts to really mix styles together, and Jim was also asking about if you can talk a little bit about your father bringing those worlds together, like jazz and then the Spanish influences, such as the bullfighting and certain places, because I believe that your father's wife was Mexican.
That's correct.
And a lot of influences came from Mexico as well.
That's right. That's right. Well, let's check out just a couple more things from the 40s because I think they set it up so nicely. So I mean, you know, and he would want us to talk about what bebop did to him and for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
What the, you know, so I mean, in 1939, 40, 41, we're on the cusp of these great innovations in the music, and I mean, starting to be hinted at by Charlie Christian, by Nat King Cole, these kind of bridge players who are showing us some place where we might go. Lester Young and his kind of forward momentum and the 4/4 of Count Basie as opposed to the old 2-feel, and then things kind of break open and you have bebop and you have an examination of you have people learning harmony and learning things that had been obscured, they hadn't been able to get to before, and so I just know for him that spark of hearing. I mean, he would always talk about how when Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie came to LA and played at Billy Berg's, you know, he was there like all the time to listen to them at Billy Berg's and soaking up what they were bringing. So if you have the Groovin' High, maybe that would be the good one to play.
Absolutely.
It just shows his response to that moment. And in fact, nobody else had written. I think Dizzy's band had an arrangement of it, and he wrote an arrangement of it, and those are the only arrangements that existed of that piece for a while. So,
well, that is also a statement of how forward thinking he also was, because on this record, which is from a couple of years later, Eternal Equinox, Equinox from Coltrane is on that. And it's mentioned in the liner notes that was the first arrangement that was made from that specific tune. And I think your dad speaks also in the liner notes and talks about the musicians and the pieces that are on this record. But you know, like the fearlessness that he had to undertake, you know, put his view on a bebop tune or like a Coltrane tune later on. So it's really astonishing to see that now through your explanation, like your historical explanations of it. So that's super cool.
Yeah, and I agree, Kevin. You really hear it on the intro to Groovin' High. I feel like where Gerald's really being Gerald and stretching a little bit, because as you wait for the tune to come in, you're like surprised by all these little moments that he crams in, not cram, but just somehow gets to all these little gems of ideas right at the beginning.
Yeah. So let's take a listen to Groovin' High. This is played. Yeah, say that again.
I have to listen to the whole record, although it's just a couple minutes. We should listen to it.
Yeah. I would agree. Here we go. Gerald Wilson and his orchestra, Groovin' High.
Oh yes.
That Night in Tunisia quote in there, it's so
Yeah.
freaking hip.
It's great.
Mashing
Totally.
it right up into there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
so good. So good.
Great
Yeah,
modulation.
altered dominance, you know, a
Oh,
different approach to rhythm. Yeah, stretching right into bebop, you know. Responding, being responsive, I think. That's I just, you know, it was unique at that time, and there weren't bands playing that way. So
Hmm.
I love that it happened in LA, because, you know, people like to kind of say, well, there wasn't much going on, you know, but there were musicians obviously who were listening and taking note, you
Oh
know.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So
And
good. So
and that's I think a large attribution to that is because of Diz and Bird uh, coming over here and playing at Billy Berg's for like 8 or 9 weeks straight with Stan Levy on
yeah,
drums, and they took Ray Brown also on bass. That's often forgotten that those guys came out here to play. And a little later on, Clifford Brown with Max,
yeah.
that they played at the Lighthouse, that kind of stuff. That's often forgotten that all of those cats were just here for weeks on end.
Yes, yes. I don't know if the drummer is Henry Tucker Green. There's also a drummer named Charles Thompson who worked with him, but I'm not sure. But I just think that's a great one to see. You know, what a development from High Spook and Yard Dog Mazurka into that. And then I wanted to, you know, and also around that same time, Dizzy Gillespie uh, was collaborating with Cuban musicians.
right.
Yeah.
And so you have recordings like Cubano B, Cubano Bop, uh, and he actually brought my dad in to write for him at that time. And there's one piece that it's really, really near to my heart, which in some way will also kind of links up with what you're talking about in terms of a kind of a cross cultural fertilization into the music. A piece called Guarachi Guaro. Guarachi Guaro. And so let me see if I can play that. We'll just go straight to it. Let's see. So I got to go to my Spotify. I'm so share screen from Spotify. Share. And I hope it's sharing the audio. Is there something I have to do specially to do that? Or
Usually when you want to share screen, there is also an option before you share the screen to also share the sound with that.
let's stop that then again. Okay. Aha, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boom. Spotify Premium. Okay, so here's Guachiwado. They say Guachiwado.
Wachi Wado. Oh, I love this tune. This is
You know
killer.
this. You
Oh,
know
it's
this.
so good. I don't think I realized this was Dizzy.
Hmm.
That's
I
great.
love it. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
so modern to this very day. You know, I actually would love to hear that kind of thickness and density and harmonic. Like you really don't hear it. And this is what my dad would always. He wanted to drive this home. Like so many arrangers stick with the kind of the basic 4 and 5 part way of voicing things. That's sort of, I mean, it's all correct and it's all good, and with little extensions here and there. And, you know, when there's a sound, but there's such a huge world of harmonic color and density that's available. And his solution was just to use it all the time. So those kind of shifting kind of tectonic plates of the sections in that one thing where the saxophones are kind of mashed up and the trombones are moving, and there's these alterations in the chords, and it's just dense. And that became his signature thing, to always load up the charts with 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 that kind of information, you know, that color and that intensity. So he was already doing it in all of these early pieces. So
Yeah, this is 40, late 40s?
46,
Wow.
46, and yeah, so obviously really a fruitful time and
Yeah.
it makes me think about just being a musician and the nature of being a musician and what it is to be learning and absorbing things from the people around us, you know, that are doing things. I mean, and I think so many of us are so keyed in and clued into that. It's like you want to just keep going to the next edge that you can possibly get to, and find out more and how you can grow. And these arrangements seem to be a testament to that for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Should we continue on with something from that big band Modern
love to, yeah.
album, because this was a great example, but from there he really makes a huge shift in what you're saying, and that's the thing that I love about all of your dad's compositions and arrangements, how full of color and
Yeah.
how full of color all of the pieces are, and it's very beautifully layered and all of that, but it's also full sounding and using the entire sound also of the orchestra, what you mentioned also a little bit in the beginning.
I should say that so in 1945, 46, uh, he had a great deal of success with his band, and he traveled quite a bit. Um, there, if you sort of dig through old newspaper advertisements, there's a wonderful guy in France who used to be involved quite a bit with Universal and Verve, Daniel Richard. You guys might both follow him. You should.
Okay.
He's a really beautiful person. Um, and he produced records for uh, for Verve. I think it's pretty much Verve, but in Universal. Uh, but he's kind of his historian, and every now and then he puts up. He's always putting up old advertisements that he finds in old newspapers, and you know he found some of my father from the 40s, and my father played all around the country, played at the Apollo Theater, all over for a number of weeks. He had a lot of bookings in these ads that say, you know, and these small newspaper items, they'll say, you know, the hottest big band working today, you know, like, uh, so he was doing well, but he actually decided that that he was nowhere near where he needed to be as a musician in terms of ability, skills, and study to be able to sustain he felt the kind of success he was having, and he felt like he would just end up hitting a wall. And so he stopped working. He split up the band, And he stayed in Los Angeles, and he spent a great deal of time studying classical music, classical scoring. He was very close with a composer named Phil Moore, and between the two of them, like, there was a lot of real digging back into classical music. Stravinsky, Scriabin, Shostakovich. They were interested in modern music, and so I think during those years, although he did continue writing for other bands, and he took writing jobs, but he basically stayed home and shedded, you know. And so maybe also that's something that comes to fruition in the 50s, is a greater understanding about what might be possible for him as a composer for a large jazz orchestra. So it's perfect. We should listen to this now.
Yeah. Are you okay with listening to Lotus Land?
Yeah.
Cool. All
So
right,
cool.
let's do it.
Great.
Here we go. Lotus Land, and this is an original composition by your father, if I'm not mistaken.
No. This is an arrangement of a piece by a composer named Cyril Scott, I believe
Okay.
is the name of the composer. Maybe a British composer. Sounds quite a British name. I don't know enough about him. We can maybe do a little meta lookups, and but yes, so it's not an original tune.
Okay. Well, in any case, here's Lotus Land by Gerald Wilson.
What a great ending.
Yeah,
Amazing. Amazing.
it's
So
a
played
it's
that.
a production from the great Jordi Pujol from Fresh Sounds, and
Jordy.
I don't know the stuff that you wanted to tell about that
Yeah,
composition.
luckily, yeah. So a couple of things to note about that piece. So the recording's about 1954, and the great writer Mark Stryker from Detroit, he wrote a book that came out about a year or so ago about musicians from Detroit, and there's a chapter about my father in it, and Mark has been particularly obsessed with these recordings from the 50s. He really adores them and thinks that they're underrated. So he talks a little bit about them. One thing that's just very interesting is, and he says stuff like, the music is astonishing, pulsating with Latin American rhythms and percussion, snake charmer melodies, distinctive grooves, and exotic woodwind sonorities. Um, the ensemble sounds increasingly dense as Wilson puts instruments in contrary motion and spreads his chords across the brass in 8-part harmony as meaty as a thick-cut sirloin.
Nice.
Anyway, but he mentions that the band includes Paul Gonsalves and
Oh,
Teddy Edwards and Clark Terry
Oh,
and Britt Woodman, and that the flute soloist on Lotus Land is Bill Green.
oh, the
And
great
Bill
Bill
oh,
Green
Green.
is just a great person to give some homage to, because he was
Indeed.
really, really amazing woodwind player. He played uh, like every instrument. I know he was a mentor to Jeff Clayton.
So
mm,
many.
Um,
Yeah.
and he was, he played on many movie scores, film things, so many record dates, and he had back in the day like a studio in which he taught. He would teach classes on woodwinds, on harmony, on improvisation. It was on La Brea, right by San Vicente. It was
mm.
just north of San Vicente, and I had a couple of friends who took lessons, took classes with him. So I went a few times, and he might have 25 people in the room, and he was teaching them
Oh, cool.
patterns. He was teaching them, chord structure. He's just a really important person, I think, in Los Angeles
Sure.
jazz history and in imparting and offering knowledge to the young generations. So, and God, he plays so beautifully on that recording. Just
Gorgeous.
Yeah, the website of Fresh Sounds credits also Melba listed on that recording that Zoot Sims and Stan Getz and Wardell Gray make special appearances on at least the first 8 tracks of that production. Yeah, because it's two sessions put together in one CD basically.
right, right.
And Lee Young plays drums apparently on this track, who is the brother of Lester Young.
Young, and they were very close. I mean, Lee Young, because my father played in a band, in Buddy Collette's band um, that had Lee Young, I think Red Callender, Irving Ashby. So yeah, Lee Young. My father loved Lee Young, and Jeff Hamilton often talks about Lee Young. They were close in his later years, and I know that they spent time together.
Mm,
Wonderful drummer who people don't really know about. So,
hmm
and a fixture on Central Avenue for sure.
Yeah, yeah. We had you saw the Lori Pepper episode, and I've been reading Straight Life, and Lee Young was one of the first drummers who played with Art
Mhm.
actually on
Yeah,
Central Avenue when Art was like a young lad of 15 or 16 years old that he was playing there at the clubs.
it's so cool.
Yeah, it's all intertwined.
But how amazing, just a testament to what study can do.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
and
Right.
I he was very he loved Ravel. He loved
You can hear it.
Debussy. You
Yeah.
can hear it there. He loved Manuel de Falla.
Mm.
Uh, so these composers and the textures that they brought to their orchestrations were very
Yeah.
important to him. And listening to that, I mean, it makes me think that that Gil Evans I mean, Gil Evans had his own voice very early and was doing his own thing, but it makes me think he was aware of these recordings, because there's
Totally.
something there there's a certain kind of way of
Yeah.
voicing for the orchestra, these warm textures, these very sinewy things that are unique, that you know.
This track in particular, actually, Anthony, reminded me of this one Gil Evans cut on Out of the Cool,
Mm-hmm.
where flamingos fly.
Sure,
And
sure.
it's that meditative, like you saying, the warm pad of the orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and there's some Russ Garcia from the late '50s that has this.
Yeah,
Some of those
that's right.
writers that were experimenting with some of that, but totally, I heard the Gil thing
Yeah,
in there for sure. But it is a testament to what he was studying in the '50s. I didn't know he spent that time really getting
yeah.
into study. You can really start to hear it come out.
He was very, very interested in that,
Yeah.
and in the records uh, from the '60s. A lot of that comes to great fruition too. So yeah, I'm sure I was wanting to just see in my in my playlist if there was anything that I wanted to share from there, but no. Anyway, and then you had asked about his interest in bullfighting.
Yeah.
Uh, I really believe so. My father was married for many decades to Josefina, and she was Mexican, Mexican American. She believed, if Jerry is still here, she can help flesh some of this out. But I believe she grew up here in Glendale,
Mm.
and it must have been her that turned him on to bullfighting. But then they became like, I mean, he became like a super Stan fan. He really he loved the bullfights, and so he wrote many pieces as dedications to bullfighters over the years, and loved these sounds, especially these kind of brass fanfare sounds, certain kinds of brass writing that I believe is very specific to the corrida. But I, if Jerry happens to be chiming in, that's great. But we could possibly listen to some of that music. I'm not sure where you want to go and how much time you have. You know,
I got time enough.
We, as long as you want to do it,
I mean,
yeah.
but maybe also staying in the '50s a little. We could maybe
Sure.
even listen to a couple of things, because I know you guys had on your list. You had some of the Ray Charles country and western, but that's '60s, right? Well, that's going
Yeah,
to be '60s. I guess it
yeah.
doesn't really matter what, but I mean, I love to think about also what he was doing to make a living, and some
Hmm.
of the things that he was doing to make a living were to write for other artists, to write for singers, and there's some really great charts. Maybe some of that stuff is worth
Sure.
listening to. I mean, like, I mean, just yeah. Let's. Oh, what's really great little thing to listen to is this. Maybe Josh and I could each share something. You had that thing from Buddy Collette, right, Josh?
Yeah.
And so he's playing on that.
Yeah, it says it. I mean, I think it's true. I just found it on YouTube.
Cool. Well, yeah. I mean, maybe we could play a couple of these little small. I have something fun from 1958, which
Sure.
is a
You want
piece
to
of
start with
his
that?
that he wrote and that was recorded by the Chico Hamilton Quintet
Oh, that's cool.
with Eric Dolphy and Dennis
Oh.
Budimir on guitar.
Oh,
And,
shit.
Nice.
and this is a little contrafact on. It's just one of those things. It's called Tuesday at 2, and that would be fun to just, we're kind of going with the breadth of what he was all about.
Yeah.
And this is a great little.
Wow. That's killing.
What's the instrumentation? Because it sounds like sax.
Cello.
Cello.
And I don't know if that's Fred Katz on this record. Let's see. It's Eric Dolphy on alto and flute, Nathan Gershman on cello, Dennis Budimir on guitar, and Wyatt Ruther on bass. So just, I love it because we tend to associate my father with large group things, and there's a scant few small groupy things out there. Like he was the trumpet player on some of Curtis Counce's recordings. That we've spoken about Curtis Counce before. A great album called Leroy Walks by Leroy Vinegar with Victor Feldman and Frank Butler.
That's a great record.
Really good album. And then of course he was playing with Buddy Collette's band, and so there was this community, and he used to tell me, like, always keep your chops up, because if you get too far deep into writing, there's going to be a point of you're going to get to a point of no return where you won't be able to come back. And like, and he was telling me, he was telling me this in like the 80s, you know, because I mean, he ended up stopping playing horn really
Right.
for all intents and purposes. I mean, and especially an instrument like the trumpet, which requires a certain amount of keeping in physical condition in your face
Absolutely.
and keeping your teeth right. And he had different dental issues and different. So like, but mainly he said, you know, like the whole world of writing is such an intoxication and such a endless thing that if you go too far into it, you'll be too deep and you won't be able to come out. So he would always say, like, be one of those musicians who writes a lot but still plays, you know. It's great to listen to him. I mean, he's not playing on that date, but on the, but I love him just contributing tunes to a band and things like that. It's just super cool to me. So
Yeah. That's sage advice.
Yeah.
I've been deep in writing land and working on this film, and I'm like, some days I don't have anything to do with this thing behind me.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess I better. And especially during COVID, it's so hard. We're not playing with each other. It doesn't always inspire me to just play by myself. So we got to play when this is over. But yeah, right. Don't let it go. Well,
Yeah.
let's just share this really quick little thing I found on
Yes.
YouTube that I shared with Anthony, and he apparently you weren't aware of it. It's it's called "Selling Boats and All That Jazz," 1960, and I just was looking around YouTube and just seeing what I found, and then composed and recorded as a soundtrack for an industrial film. Gillespie makes your 1960s sail picture. Gillespie was a boat manufacturer in 1960. And this was an album people got who bought a boat as like a promotional, hey, thanks for buying a boat. Now here's some jazz, you know. And it's just, I think it's kind of killing. It's a little janky, the transfer, so bear with us, everybody. But this is kind of a cool little find. It's Red Calendar on bass and tuba, and Buddy Collette on every reed that he played, the great Earl Palmer on drums,
Oh, killing.
and Gerald playing trumpet. And there's just two tracks I would share. They're super short. One's called Mystified, and one's called Speedy. So we'll just listen to Buddy Collette with Gerald Wilson, Red Calendar, and Earl Palmer for a minute. 1960. Here it is. Nice transition from Lotus Land.
Yeah.
That's it. They're so short.
It's so good. I love it.
I love hearing your dad play, and in this setting without a chordal instrument. I'm just gonna like eat this record up. It's 11 tracks. It's on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
the next one, Seafair Shanty, Red Calendar plays like Blow the Man Down. I mean, it's like so kind of out.
So amazing, so amazing. What great musicians, and they were all such close friends, you know, and
Friends.
I mean, and this was around the same time, that the musicians union in Los Angeles, there were two unions. There was one for black musicians, there was one for white musicians, and so this was about the time that there was a big movement afoot to amalgamate the two unions. Buddy Collette was a big part of that. My father was a big part of that. Many of these musicians, wishing for a kind of equity in the way they were paid and in the way that they had benefits and et cetera, and rather than an unequal situation. And so these guys really pushed to put the union together. So that was part of that time for all of these guys. I mean, when I was young and meeting Red Callender and Earl Palmer and John Collins and Buddy and Teddy Edwards, this was a big thing that they talked about. This was part of their activism, and so these recordings like this of those guys, it puts that in mind for me. Something that they were very proud of to do. Somehow we're even going chronologically, which is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
It's super
It's
cool.
great. I love it.
And also at the same time, my father was working a fair amount for Duke Ellington. He contributed things to Ellington's band. He was one of the rare composer arrangers that Ellington Strayhorn trusted to contribute to the band's book or sit in the band from time to time and record with the band. So, for instance, I think Anatomy of a Murder is around the same time. I think you had that on your list. Perhaps maybe one of the tracks or an excerpt could be worth checking out. I mean, for me, it's like as such a huge fan of Ellington, to know that my father was an Ellingtonian and really part of that family, it's so great. And Mark Stryker actually also has a really great quote about that, because he talks a little bit about how my father contributed a number of things to the book and played in the band and recorded with them. And David Berger said to Mark Stryker, Gerald was never intimidated by Duke. A lot of people have fallen into the trap of having so much respect for Duke that they're afraid to do their own thing. And I think I love that he was really his own musician, his own man, and brought that to the Ellington organization. Wow. And that's just in a life of doing music, just one more thing that I think is such a great honor. And,
in that interview about the Detroit album, he talks about that Ellington called him for the first time to write two pieces for the band, and that Ellington said, like, no, I need them tomorrow or in like 2 days. Yeah. I need them in the morning. And then and your father goes, okay, I'll do that. And then he doesn't hear anything from Ellington for about 8 years. And then he gets a call, Gerald, can you write a couple pieces for me? And your father asks, when do you need them? Today at 2 p.m. at Capitol Records. And he goes like, I haven't heard from Ellington for 8 years. And then all of a sudden he calls me again. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, wow, pretty blunt.
Yeah.
Also, you won't hear anything from me for 8 years, and then after 8 years, hi, it's Ellington.
Wow, that's cool.
You have something.
He also might on those first dates he might have left down without paying my dad as well. I think they worked out the money later.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak out of turn or be inaccurate, but there's at least one of these situations where, you know, they did the date and the band was off to the next town, and and my dad was waiting for his bread, but
I saw also something that you had something else of Duke's band in your Spotify playlist that I've never heard from before.
well, I that first chart that he asked my father to write was a song called "You're Just an Old Anti-Disestablishmentarianismist," and it's great. Let's play it for a second. So this would
Great.
have been, I think this may be around 1950. So, but it's a we don't have to listen to the whole maybe, but it's Ray Nance on singing.
Okay.
So that,
Oh,
for that date, it was two songs. It was a song called "You Got to Crawl Before You Walk," and "You're Just an Old Anti-Disestablishmentarianismist." And oh,
What a title.
it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Here, we'll listen to a little.
Don't be an old anti-disestablishmentarianismist. You never want to be coddled. You never want to be kissed. You're just an old anti-disestablishmentarianismist. If I come close while we're dancing, I get a slap on the wrist. You're just an old anti-disestablishmentarianismist. You have no use for the moonlight. You turn your back on a star. Your heart is fenced and you're against the state of things as they are. When you're 100 years older, maybe you'll want what you've missed. Don't be an old anti-disestablishmentarianismist. Don't be an old anti-disestablishmentarianismist.
Yeah.
Ah, that's great.
man,
Well,
that's
so
got
I
a
was just sitting
pocket.
there imagining him. Yeah,
Oh.
totally. And I was just imagining him writing the chart overnight, you know, and he used to talk about also just, you know, the old schoolers, you know, writers that he met back in the day, you know, when they were doing tons of dates in the old bands. With Lunceford's band, he'd say, you know, I'd watch, you know, so and so start with a trumpet part and write the arrangement straight to the parts, no score, you know, which like so you're holding this arrangement in your mind, like
Yeah.
you got to write fast, so why score it out? Just start on the parts, and then so you're pulling different parts over it as you get the sections done. It's kind of amazing, but that's working fast and coming up with. I mean, that's amazing chart.
Yeah,
and that's so at that time, I believe that that was one of the times that Johnny Hodges was on the outs with Duke, like he maybe had asked for. There was a time that he went off to do his own thing, and that's Willie Smith playing lead alto.
Oh,
you can hear kind of the different voice there, in the saxophone section. And so cool.
Thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard that.
That's great.
Great.
The connection of Willie Smith is also an old Fletcher Henderson, Jimmie Lunceford connection.
Right. Yeah. Nice, Kev.
Yeah.
I love that. It's not an accident, but that's Duke up there on the wall, and your dad's right under him. I love how that worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a legacy, and just the connection. And Ellingtonia, man. That's just so special.
Yeah, absolutely.
He used to say that, definitely Billy Strayhorn was one of his mentors. In the early 40s, he got to know Billy Strayhorn quite a bit, and Billy Strayhorn took him under his wing and showed him literally how to do things, like how to voice things, how to make, this is how you do it, Gerald. And so, so he was part of that for sure. That legacy. And
that's incredible.
That world.
Should we, because now we're actually getting, we're working chronologically, so now we're getting ourselves into the 60s, and you can hear the influence from the hard bop, basically going into your dad's music. So do you think that, for example, Patterns is a good example?
Absolutely.
Patterns or Nancy Joe?
Either one of those.
All right. So
I do have, I love so Nancy Joe is one of my sisters.
Okay.
So I love her, but I love Patterns as well. So
because a lot of titles have names, right? And that has to do with family members.
He used to say he had a great patter. I kind of wish that we had some films of him introducing a song, for instance, because he could really set it up, and one of the things that he said was, I write songs about people, places, and things. Mm-hmm. But I love that. Of course, I guess that's what everything is. But he wrote about the people that he loved. There were animals. So Blues for Yunya. Yunya was the name of a cat that my sisters had. So he wrote music for the people in his life. Yeah. So, yeah. And Nancy Joe is a real. Nancy Joe is a classic.
Yeah.
And it's a romp, and it's not too long, so it'd be worth listening to it.
Right. Both of these songs that we're talking about are on Moments of Truth. So this is Patterns off of Moments of Truth by the Gerald Wilson Orchestra.
Jack Wilson on the piano.
Carmel.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so good.
That was Joe Pass, and if I have to make a guess, that was Harold Land
That's
on
Harold.
tenor,
Yep.
Carmel Jones. It was a ridiculous band on
Mel
this
Lewis on
recording.
drums, right?
Mel, yes, yes, absolutely.
Killing,
Butchank,
swinging.
Butchank, Joe Maney,
Hmm.
Lou Blackburn, Bob Edmondson, Lester Robinson. There were two sessions with
Two, yeah.
Right.
with a couple.
I think you're naming some of the right folks. On the
Yeah,
record, it says personnel side one: Harold Land, Bud Shank, Jack Wilson, Jimmy Bond.
right. Yeah, the
Yeah.
fat beat of Jimmy Bond. That's for sure.
That's right. That's right. And just yeah, I mean, yeah, as you say, you bring up something so important. I mean, small group interplay had really become the order of the day, and uh, and this is like having a small group approach to big band jazz. I mean, you know, it's very modular. I mean, those backgrounds could be moved around. I've conducted this music where you try different things because it's a kind of modal AABA tune, you know, and it's based on simple building blocks, and that became one of his great signatures. I think it's like cracking the code on writing with great simplicity, allowing the rhythm section and the soloist at times to really just be the driving force of the whole thing, and then to bring in the orchestra at places to heighten an effect or to warm the situation up. It's much more kind of small group approach. And then he had other things that were much more involved. But I mean, other pieces on this album are things like Viva Tirado, which, you know, it's these kind of ostinatos that become the building blocks of a piece, that he can choose at will how he's going to use them in relation to a soloist. So not necessarily this kind of through composed thing. So those were other approaches that he was working with that I love. You know.
It's kind of a precursor to Thad and Mel, almost.
Yeah.
Very much so. And I mean, Mel, I mean, you guys know that I'm an absolute, you know, like I'm absolutely obsessed with Mel Lewis, and we talked about this also on you were our very first guest also on the show. To have like the greatest big band drummer who treats a big band like a small group.
Yes.
It's a pure logic over there. So
yeah, so good, so great to listen to that. And my friend Joe Harley, who's produced a number of my albums, and he works with Blue Note these days in curating their Tone Poet series of LP reissues. This is one of the albums that they're cutting for a really faithful new vinyl edition of, taken from the original tapes. So Moment of Truth will be, I think, maybe in 2022 will be.
Oh, that's great news.
Could be this year. I'm not quite sure, but
wow. Cool.
So that's cool. It'll be sounding really good. I mean, it sounds great. It sounds great. It never sounded anything less than great. But in case people are looking for a new vinyl version, these will be really good. Moment of Truth. I mean, the title song. I mean, can I just find? Let me just find this. Yeah, because one of my very favorite moments in all of my dad's work is on Moment of Truth, and goes back to what I was saying about him being at heart a blues musician and bringing the voice of the sound of blues into an orchestral context, to me, better than anybody else ever did it. It's a personal opinion, but I think it's because it's from where he came from, it's what he heard. And this, I mean, I'm just going to have to actually find it, but the song Moment of Truth has a here it is. Okay, I'm going to share. It has an ensemble section, a shout chorus that just stops me in my tracks every time I hear it.
So good.
It's something so special. So I'll just sort of share my screen and I'll find this thing. And So that album, it's just such a special album.
It's so great.
And yeah, just something about the cry of the orchestra, just the way it cries and moans. There's something there that I don't feel like I ever heard in any other arranger. And I love, there's different things. I've been listening to all of this stuff, like the use of unison saxes against a brass thing. Like he does it from the very beginning to forever. I mean, he did it forever, and it's such a. And then suddenly the saxophones will suddenly branch out into a very unexpected harmonized thing, and then come back to these lines that are. I mean, he's painting in a way, with
Absolutely.
with the colors of the orchestra. So much at his command to do something, as simple as whatever, something that simple, and then something that's as involved as this kind of antiphonal call and response of the sections of the orchestra. Just, yeah, really beautiful, bright moments there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
Mel, God, what he's, what's happening in that rhythm section is so good. So good.
I mean, that's what I call a big boy tempo. Also, that tempo like that, like what's on the cusp of, like, you can rush it or it's easy to drag it, but it stays there. That kind of like bluesy slow tempo. It's yeah. There's nobody like Mel, that's for sure.
Well, I have an idea, Anthony, because this has been so much
Yeah.
fun with you, and I knew some about your father, but I want to know more, and I bet people here, and there's actually been people commenting that they want you to come back. Since he's has such a long, beautiful career, what if we did another session?
Part two.
And then kind of part two, 60s and beyond,
Yeah.
or 70s.
Probably a good idea.
We can't get to everything today.
Yeah.
I participate in this kind of a Sunday group for writers, artists, readers, and
Nice.
and sometimes there's so many contributions. The person who is the woman who kind of created the group, she always thinks, okay, well, we'll have a week, and everybody will read, and then it turns into 3. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you do get tired, and also to do the work justice, I'm totally up for
Yeah, I see
come
now you're
back,
too,
and we
like,
can talk about the things that we want to show at that time. So
yeah, I see with multiple people here that people are asking for there should be a part 2.
Uh,
okay.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I think
that would be great because we really kind of focused on more of his history and his roots and the Lunceford Band and Ellington, and then moving into his time in LA and Buddy Collette and all those. So there's so much more to explore. I mean, yeah, we let off with 60s with Out of This World, but man, this is so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I love talking to you guys.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I love being a flag waver for my dad because he, there was during Black History Month, there was a thing that CNN did during the month of February where, like, every day they featured different people, all kinds of people from the Black community, maybe unsung people. So one of the days they did a little feature about him, and it was super cool, and it was on their website and tweeted, and but a lot of people wrote and said, like, oh my God, I'm a huge fan of big band jazz, but I didn't know of this person, and so to feel that, and like, not only I didn't know about this person, but I didn't know about him, and now I'm such a fan of his work. So anything that I can do in a way that can help to, continue to spread the word about what he did and I think what he meant to a lot of people. so many people.
Yeah,
I'm up for it.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, that's exactly kind of the mission for us too, not specifically only to your dad, but for West Coast music in general, to put people onto beautiful, gorgeous stuff that that not a lot of people would know about.
yeah,
Just that alone fits perfectly in what we want to do. So um, yeah, it surprises to me because like also Eternal Equinox is such a good example of that he puts a 21-year-old George Duke on the production, like that what you also said, like he loves to he loves to surround himself with young and upcoming talent. And he talks about in the liner notes, he talks extensively about George Duke, like, oh yeah, it's this 21-year-old kid who plays his ass off. Have you heard about him? To the reporter or whoever wrote the liner notes. Um, but it surprises me that people are coming up to you and say that they don't know about your father, while he is such a momentous figure to so many people in the music world, in the jazz world. And I didn't know that Charles Lloyd was also in your father's bands.
yeah.
So those kind of things of like people who are world famous who came through the bands of your father and through his music as well. It's just incredible.
Even Ornette Coleman and Don Cherry played in the band for a hot minute. I mean, probably more when he was, sometimes when he was rehearsing or just keeping the band kind of going. But somewhere here, so I had always heard about this, this situation in which Ornette had brought a chart in, and
Hmm.
that there was apparently a score that still existed. And so I've got it here somewhere. And it's it's really a fragment. I think Ornette wrote a fragment and brought it into the band. And so this is 50s, late 50s, and Charles was in the band, and they played it through, and Don Cherry was in the band. So yeah, so many people, and he loved that, to know these young musicians and help mentor them and bring them up. So
Mm.
Yeah, so I'm all for doing a part two
Yeah,
for
if
sure.
you are
okay,
Anthony, yeah, I would love to. And on
of
a
course.
personal note, you know how I feel about you. But for those who are listening, just a big influence on me and my music. And that moment, you are that is, but that moment, the moment of truth, at LACMA. When your dad came, you had your nonette there, and he came and conducted Viva or started Viva Torado.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'll never forget that moment. It was the same feeling I had, when I first got to play with Natalie and she like turned to me and looked into my eyes. I was just like awestruck by the legacy on stage with me and that connection to history. Um,
Mm.
and I just feel really lucky to, have gotten to play with you and have you part of my albums and hopefully
Mm.
more music to come, and your dad's legacy coming through you and your own sound and everything. It's just fascinating. So I hope there's
Yeah.
like us
So this is
younger
so.
cats that can continue to discover your dad's legacy. There's a new generation, I think, that really respond to his music and the power that it has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to that. I was gonna just. I mean, I love what you guys are doing, and I think we're living in a moment that right now people are reaching back and learning much more about the offerings and the invitations that were put out there by our ancestors and by the great musicians, artists, thinkers that did things. There's so much. I'm seeing more acknowledgement these days
Mm-hmm.
in so many sectors of culture, uh, and towards Black musicians who maybe were underappreciated. I see it all over, and I think that's one good thing that comes out of this way of engaging with technology and sharing. I mean, it's, I mean, I know that like Jason Moran did something where he interfaced with a Herbie Nichols interview. Did you know about this?
No.
He had found like a unreleased or unearthed some kind of Herbie Nichols interview. And like the idea that you could go and you could listen to Herbie Nichols' voice talking about his own music, and that somehow that's taking us into that person's world for just a moment. And maybe people start to appreciate these artists and thinkers, writers, you know, people like Octavia Butler, you know, my friend Linnell George has done a lot of work with her archive. Are you familiar with her, Josh?
Yeah.
The writer,
Yes.
Kevin, science fiction writer.
I'm familiar.
Really
I haven't read that much though. Yeah.
But people are digging in, and like, I just love that. Like, I love that we have this opportunity because these people left their work, and it's up to us, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Deep dive, you get to find out about them, find out what made them tick, and what it was like, and what they were doing as they moved through the world. Very important. So.
Did you see they named the landing site for the new Perseverance rover Octavia Butler?
I did see that.
That's so cool. Yeah. Yeah, I love science commenting on science fiction and art. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I gotta find that Jason Moran thing. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. I
Please
can post it
share.
in the chat or something.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that note,
yeah,
I think
we have a promise to come back.
Oh yes, for sure. We're gonna keep that promise for sure. So we'll wrap things up. Everybody who's watching, again, our apologies for the slight technical snafu in the middle of the interview, but Facebook threw us off the air. But we would like to really thank Anthony Wilson for the time that he's spending with us and talking about his legacy and his father's legacy and all of the music that you've shown, because it's just your father is still a national treasure, and I think you are as well, because I've been checking out your own music as well, and there's always a super cool story behind all of the music that you make, which I think comes also directly from your father. So thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and all of your wisdom and all of this music that's coming from your dad, but I would say it's also coming a little bit from you.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's very much my pleasure to be with you guys and share in all of this. So thank you.
And thank you everybody who watched. We have tons of comments, and we'll try to get back to all of you guys. But for now, thank you guys for watching, and we'll be back with new guests next month. So we'll see you then.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Josh. Good night, Kevin.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Anthony. Thank you. Okay. Sweet.
All right.